All right, welcome back to another edition of the Franklin Community High School Career Exploration Project. Today I have with me Scott Sanders, and Scott is the Vice President of Development and National Build-to-Suit Officer for Ambrose Property Group. That sounds like a big deal. Why don't you tell me what it is?
Thanks,
First
Brian.
of all, Scott, thanks for joining me.
Of course. And thanks. And yeah, the title's a bit of a mouthful, but in essence, a couple things. So Ambrose Property Group, we are a real estate developer, 100% focused on industrial development. So what that means to most of us is we're building and developing warehouses across the country, hence the national build-to-suit for big brand names that we're used to, like Amazon.com, Deckers. They own UGG boots and Sanuk sandals. The Walmarts, the big box e-commerce retailers. That's the growth of their business is what drives our business. So that's what Ambrose does. We're based out of Indianapolis. We're a privately held company, started in 2008, and I've been here for just over a couple years. And then my role within the company, the National Build-to-Suit Officer, is I liken it to this. We're really, really good at building and developing industrial buildings in Indianapolis, and we call those home games. And my fortunate career path has made myself and my team really, really good at doing the same thing across the country and playing away games. So our billing, if you're a client that's interested in and done a deal with us in Indianapolis, we would say, hey, great, we love interacting with you, earning your business. Let us build for you and develop for you across the country. And that's what my team does.
Yeah. Now, how did you kind of get to this point? What are some other careers that you've had in the past, and what was kind of your educational background?
Sure. So I often lengthen out a story, and this one will have 2 or 3 turns that I think are entertaining. But starting out, went to high school locally here in Indianapolis, and growing up in the way I've always been wired, I'm very technically focused. Math came easy to me. Personally, wasn't big into reading literature, the art side of things. So I was always steering myself towards an engineering background because at a young age, folks, with my skill set, there's just a natural fit. Hey, you're good at math, you like tinkering, think about an engineering career. I applied, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. I didn't like to write, didn't like to read. So I was trying not to apply at places that I had to write essays and that sort of thing in the application process. So I applied to Purdue and Texas A&M, were the 2 strong engineering schools that didn't require essays. Got into both, thankfully, and as any good Midwesterner would do, in-state tuition, and Purdue University made a lot of sense. So went up there and went into engineering.
Okay. So then after that, so you go to Purdue, you major in engineering. What happens happens after that, and where do you go from there?
Sure thing. So I majored in mechanical engineering, and in high school and going into college, I thought for sure I'm going to design cars, I'm going to design boats, I'm going to design planes. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. It was cool and sexy in my line of thinking, and was there for 2 years and did not design any cars or planes or boats. I learned about things like the Carnot cycle and mass transfer and theory of thermodynamics and things of that nature. So I was fortunate to grab an internship with a construction company, and I just wanted experience, locally in town. And for that company, it was Duke Realty, was the company I got an internship with, and I frankly was a laborer. So over my summers, I was out pushing a broom. I was running a pump, pumping out footings. I was, hammering nails, doing carpentry work on the site. And one day, and I'll never forget because this relatively changed my career path, I'm sitting there on site doing my thing, basically playing in the mud and manual labor. And someone shows up on site. They're not dressed like the rest of us, no hard hat, no vest, whatever. They walk up, and all of a sudden, kind of folks start flocking to this person. And they're asking them questions, and you could tell this individual was kind of directing traffic with everyone on site, telling, here's the schedule we got to hit, here's the changes, they're controlling the budget. And I remember at the end of that day, I went and asked my boss at the time, I said, who was that guy that showed up today? And boss says, "Oh, that was, his name's Brent. He's a project manager." I said, "Okay." And again, I knew nothing of this. I was like, "Project manager for the construction company?" They're like, "Yeah." And so I literally was like, "Okay, well, I kind of liked, what he did." So I went back after that summer and I transferred out of mechanical engineering into construction engineering and management. So still getting an engineering degree. And my goal was to become a project manager. And that's finished out school, got a job as a project manager, ironically at Duke Realty, which was a developer, but also had a construction arm that I worked for. And that's how I started my career.
Now, Brent, did you get to know him? Are you friends with him? Were you his boss at some point?
What the irony of all that? So Brent moved his way up at Duke. I worked for Brent out of school. Worked for Brent for 10 years. I was at Duke for 15 years, and was a great mentor. And he's got a VP title, some high title over at Duke, and very successful. But yeah, I got to work with him forever and look to him as a mentor. Never his boss, but that would have been fun for all of us.
Yet.
Yeah, right.
So you talked about how you like tinkering and math, and that's kind of how you got drawn into the engineering field. And it's clearly right up your alley. I mean, just in the short time we've been talking here, it just seems like this is a job that'd be good for you, I would imagine. But what are, I guess, some of the pros, some of the things you really like about it? And then even with jobs you love, every job's going to have its cons, the things you don't really like. What are some of those cons that you see?
Sure. One of the biggest pros, and part of a reason I switched the project management route, and now I'm in real estate development, which we'll chat about, is it takes the technical side, it takes the building side, the tinkering side, the science and math, and it mashes it together with personal interaction, soft skills, working in teams. One of the stereotypes of the engineering world is those folks are sitting in front of a computer all day long. Of course, they're interfacing, but it's a lot of emails and text and different mediums. That's not in-person interaction, using social skills and working on large teams. Everyone kind of has their role, and they're doing it, and that's great. And it's for a lot of people. My personality is such that I thrive on a bunch of people in the same figurative canoe going in the same direction, everyone kind of doing their thing. And I love the interaction of whether it's construction, whether it's real estate development that I'm doing now. Like, that's a huge pro for me. Another pro is a sense of accomplishment. For years, I've been doing this for 15 years. I can't tell you how many millions of square feet and number of buildings I've developed, but it means a lot to me when I can fly into an airport in Indianapolis, in Denver, in Houston, and I can see a rooftop and I can say to myself, hey, that's a building I developed. Before I started, that land was raw, and I'm flying in and I'm telling whoever doesn't care next to me on the plane, like, hey, I developed that building over there if you can check it out. And that's a huge, huge driver for me. It's satisfying. So the pros are easy and almost limitless for me in this role. I just love it. The cons are such that probably occur in a lot of industries. A lot of stressors, a lot of things you cannot control. Weather, right? How many times are we forced to deal with thunderstorms, earthquakes, tornadoes, all those things that slow the process, and we don't have any power over that, and we're obligated to a schedule and a budget, and those things cause problems. Manpower and team player, that comes with a lot of positive things. We can go hire really, really good contractors across the country, and projects are really successful. But as in all businesses, we can hire someone who's, not as effective, or maybe doesn't do as good of a job. And at that point, jobs can go south, and they're pretty painful to slug through, but we get there in the end. So like anything, it's things you can't control, and making sure you have good people on your team make it, challenging to an extent.
Yeah. Now, one of the things with your job that I've always found interesting is the travel. Now, how is that for you now, maybe compared to when you were younger? And to give everyone a glimpse of this, when you were with Duke, why don't you talk about your Washington DC connection there, and the crazy schedule that you had for that?
Sure thing. Yeah. So this was around 2008, 2009, economic downturn, had worked in Indianapolis my entire career up until that point. And at that time, you started to get creative in what sort of projects you went after. And Duke was really fortunate. They got a job. It's called BRAC 133, but for the listeners, it's basically an annex to the Pentagon. So picture Midwest developer construction company is going to go out to Washington, D.C., and we're going to build a mini version of the Pentagon in Alexandria, Virginia. It wasn't adjacent, and it housed, all sorts of government agencies. And to take a step back, why was the government doing this? This was post, this was post a lot of different events that, 9/11, other things that they were trying to get all of the government employees in secure buildings instead of having them spread across the country so they can protect information, their people, and all that. So we basically built, it was a $1 billion project back then in 08, 09. It was a 2-year job, really exciting. And we would, a group of folks from Indianapolis, there's 20 of us, we would load up on a plane on Monday morning. We'd fly out there. We'd stay till Thursday. Most of us had families back home at the time. I was engaged, so no kids and things at the time. But basically lived in D.C. from Monday to Friday for 2 years.
Yeah. So that was, I'm sure that kind of would take a toll on you eventually. How does the travel, you're not traveling as much, obviously, in the past year. When you first started, you did. How do you kind of balance that with everything you've got going on?
Sure. I think there's a couple things. One, being with the right company. For anyone that's out there working, companies that value their employees and are flexible with them is huge. Duke was that, and Ambrose Property Group is absolutely that. So I make my own travel. I'm now, just to share a little bit, married and have 3 kids. So being home for kid events and things of that nature are really important to me. I will do everything in my power to have no overnight trips so I can get to Columbus, Cincinnati, Fort Wayne, Elkhart, Chicago in day trips. Leave at 4 or 5 in the morning of my choosing so I don't have to get a hotel room, go up, do my business, and come back. And that's the sacrifice that I make because family is really important. But I do a ton of work in Denver, in California, in Texas, in Florida. And those, I limit my travel to an overnight. I fly out on the first flight I can get out. I come home on the last flight I can get home on. And I pack as much as humanly possible into those meetings. So that has been a huge, help or boom to just as I grow my family. But I'll say that is unprecedented, and we're all experiencing this. COVID, not only from a travel restriction standpoint, but all of what you and I are doing now on telecommunication, on Zoom meetings, that has been able to cut down travel at least 50%. So a meeting where we all felt it was mandatory to be in person, to do a face-to-face because we're meeting folks for the first time, 50% of those meetings now are like you and I are doing on a Zoom call, or like most of America is doing, and it's a huge help.
Yeah, that is helpful. I'm sure for someone like you who traveled all the time, and it cut down on that travel. Now, how would, I guess, if you were to go back and kind of look at the high school, how would you recommend a high school student get prepared for a career in engineering, property development, things like that?
Absolutely. So, and different high schools offer different opportunities, but what I can tell you is there were opportunities where I could have challenged myself more in advanced placement courses in math, advanced placement courses, in science, classes that were made available to me, and for whatever reason, potentially just being, lazy high school kid, I didn't take. And again, school came really easy to me, and I'm not trying to be boastful, but it's relevant. And I did really well, was top of my class in a lot of things. I showed up at Purdue University, where people are drawn from, across the nation and internationally. I was no longer the top of the class. I would say, from my own educational background and the class that I've taken, I was probably towards the lower end. I had not taken AP classes that were made available to me, and I would tell you 75% of all engineering students had. So, almost 40-year-old me talking to 15-year-old me, I would absolutely encourage, if the opportunity is there and you're ready for an AP class, take it, because it will absolutely pay dividends through college and in your career.
Yeah. All right. Last question, kind of similar to the one we just asked, but just general advice, high school advice for maybe high school Scott. or just a high school student in general, not even necessarily about careers classes, just general advice you could think of?
And this is advice I'd probably draw more from experience of others, more so than myself, and maybe something that comes up a lot on this podcast series. But what you think you want to do in high school, odds are, have the open mind, go to a school that gives you opportunities to do what you think you want to do, but a bunch of other things. And in my, microcosm here, my version, I wanted to design cars as an engineer and that's what I wanted to do. Clearly, I went to engineering school. I'm not designing cars. There was a time where I thought, oh, I'm in construction, but I love baseball and sports, and I've been to every Major League Baseball stadium in the country. Fun fact, I was going to build baseball stadiums. And an experience like I had in Washington, D.C., where you are out of town for 2 years straight, Monday through Friday, it changes that. So this is common amongst any professional, and frankly, anyone. But in high school, figure out what you're good at, figure out what you want to do, but make sure as you're going through that experience, you keep your eyes open, you keep your head on a swivel and look for other opportunities, because we all change and you want to be flexible in your career. So,
yeah, that is fantastic advice. One last quick hitter question. What's your favorite ballpark?
Great question. And there are some amazing parks that are iconic, and it's Wrigley Field, it's Fenway Park, San Francisco has an amazing park. My favorite park experience was Miller Park, and the engineer in me loves Miller Park because that roof opens up like a fan, like no other roof of any Major League stadium.
Oh, yeah.
And the engineering behind that is what makes that my favorite ballpark.
Is that similar to, was it the new Atlanta stadium? Didn't Mercedes-Benz, doesn't that open up like that?
Yeah, I think it opens up like a shell type thing. The Miller Park one, I think, opens up like a radial fan. But yeah, they've and that was one of the first of its kind. Now a lot of stadiums have the retractable roof, if you will, which is pretty neat.
Yeah. Well, once again, Scott, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and just great insight that you gave me today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for inviting me to join, and look forward to listening to some of your other podcasts on the series. I'll check them out.
Yeah. Scott Sanders, Vice President of Development and National Built to Suit Officer at Ambrose Property Group